Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing about the topic food safety management. As we all know that the world population is growing rapidly and many of the food products are being produced repeatedly across the national boundaries in order to meet a rising demand for food. So the one of the challenging factor associated with this will be the food safety or the safety aspect of the product that is being produced for the human consumption. Therefore, each of the organization that is involved in the manufacturing of food or all those stakeholders that are involved in the uh, manufacturing of food are required to have their own food safety management system in order to address this issue of food safety. Therefore, and then we have international standards like ISO 22000, which addresses the challenge of providing safe and wholesome food by providing guidance and best practices for production methods and also throughout the supply chain to ensure that the product is safe. Therefore, we need these kind of international standards. So in this video, we will be seeing what is food safety, what are the factors that is affecting food safety or the hazards, then how to develop a food safety management system for each organization, and what is ISO 22000, what are the sections under ISO 22000 which helps the organizations for developing their own food safety management system to address the issues of food safety. Now, when we talk about food safety, the term food safety defines that it is an assurance that the food will not cause any harm to the consumer when it is prepared and or eaten according to its intended use. So that is called food safety. So food safety having said that the food is safe, it helps protecting people from any source of a hazard, then it keeps the employees and customers, also prevents the food safety errors. Now if we look at the entry of hazards in a food chain, there are so many channels through which the hazards enters a food chain, starting from the sources like from vehicle emission, agricultural practices or landfills or industrial emissions. It can go to the various crops, or if it is animals or seafood, and these we use it for processing and then manufacturing of the products, and that the if at all those hazards have entered into the crops or it has reached to animals that we use for consumption, then it will even eventually enter the processing line later on through storage, distribution, and it goes on and then it reaches the retail stores and finally while cooking, and it comes to the human being who consume the food. So the entry of hazard is a long way, and it finally starting from the various sources, it finally reaches to the human beings who consumes the food. Now, hazards are the agents that causes or are harmful to the health of human beings. So, regarding the food safety, hazards may be defined in the following categories. Those are the microbiological hazards, chemical hazards, and physical hazards. Now let us see each hazards. What are these? Each of these criteria or categories. To talk about the microbiological hazards can be the food can be infected by toxic, pathogenic, or infectious pathogenic microorganisms in all stages of the food chain. Whether the contamination of microorganism will become a hazard highly depends on the several circumstances during the production of product or material. And this microbiological hazards entering food is highly related to the hygienic circumstances that happens during the production, and if at all there is any presence of killing of animals or any such circumstances during the production, or conditions in the product or material regarding possible microbiological growth or other biological hazards. It can be like insects or rodents or vermin, which can contaminate the raw material or the product during cultivation or harvesting or storing or processing. Now, if we see what are chemical hazards, chemical hazards are again classified into three categories. Those are the intrinsic chemicals which are naturally present in the food. Then it could be added materials or some of the chemical hazards entering the food due to some technical faults. Let us see what are these. If it is an intrinsic chemical, then these are already present in the food or naturally present in the food. For example, hemagglutinins, that is present as a anti-nutritional factor in red kidney beans, or poisonous mushrooms having certain toxins, are part of the intrinsic chemicals or are examples of intrinsic chemicals. Then added materials. These might cause hazards for the consumer due to overdose or reactions with other materials. These materials would be added for some preservation purpose, but then its overdose or any sort of a reaction with the food sometimes become a hazard for the human being. For example, sodium nitrite, that is usually used as a curing agent, uh, especially curing of meat, it is used as a curing agent. So now the sodium nitrate can cause a carcinogen, that is called the nitrosamines and nitrosyl myoglobin. So these can be formed due to the reaction with the meat or the product. And then coloring agents can also, because if there are overdoses or reactions with the product for, but the purpose might be for enhancing the shelf life, but some cases it may react with the product and becomes a toxin or a poisonous, or it becomes a hazard to the human being. Then there are preservatives, pesticides and fungicides. If it is a technical fault, the other classification of technical hazards, these are occurring during the cultivation or harvesting or transportation and or processing that contaminate the food with chemicals. For example, due to packaging materials containing poisonous materials in contact with the food, or certain cleaning agents that are used in the processing units or the processing equipments, and the metals that are dissolved in the product and maintenance materials. All these are examples of technical faults where the leaching of the product, certain additives from the packaging material into the product, all these are part of chemical hazards. This comes under the technical faults. Now, when we see physical hazards are also classified into two important categories, that is intrinsic physical hazards as well as technical faults. So if it is intrinsic physical hazards, the examples could be the bonds that is present in fish or meat. Those are actually present in the food by itself, naturally present. But then if it is not being able to remove during the processing, then it becomes a hazard because the consumer is unaware of the fact that it is present, and then it becomes in and then it can become a hazard. Then technical faults can be during cultivation or harvesting or transportation and processing. These might cause contamination with the physical materials, for example, foreign bodies like metals or glass or plastic in the raw materials, packaging material or engineering problems that can be some nuts or balls. All this coming into the food also becomes a physical hazard and comes under the technical faults. Now, why is a food safety management important for the organization? That is because there is intense farming and processing of food that is taking place in order to meet the demand for food. Then increase in meals that are consumed outside home is also being increased. Then the increase in ready to eat foods, more traveling across the world, an increased amount of exotic imported foods, and increase in number of susceptible people. So due to all these factors, considering all these factors, all the organizations who are involved in producing uh, food products are required to ensure that the food that they've being produced are safe for the consumption. And then, yeah, that is the main purpose of having a food safety management system within the organization itself. Now, what is this ISO 22000? As we know that ISO is International Organization for Standardization, and it has developed various standards in the various disciplines. Those are international standards. So ISO 22000 is regarding or is associated with the food safety management system. So this is a management system designed to enable the organizations to control food safety hazards along the food chain in order to ensure that the food is safe at the time of consumption. And it is being developed by the ISO's Technical Committee 34, and it has published, ISO 22000 was published on 1st of September 2005. So now if we think about why this ISO 22000 would have been developed, so the main reason was that HACCP standards were initially followed to ensure that hazards are not present in the food, or it is not, present in the various steps involved in processing of a product. But then each country used to follow their own standards regarding HACCP. Therefore, ISO 22000 had been specifically developed in order to harmonize all these individual standards followed by various industries. So this became an international standard which has to be followed by each of the countries regarding the food safety management system. When they develop their own food safety management system in each of the organization, they are required to follow this international standard. So the general properties of ISO 22000 related to the food safety management system are: it is the first global food safety standard and which harmonizes the voluntary international standards, employs proven management system principles, enables a common understanding of what a food safety management system is. It requires legal compliance checking. It integrates the existing good practice, and also it has got internal as well as external monitoring. So the scope of ISO 22000 is that all requirements that is associated with this international standards are generic in form and are intended to be applicable to all the organizations in the food chain, regardless of the type, size, and complexity of the organization. This particular standard includes and is applicable to all the organizations that are directly or indirectly involved in one or more steps of the food chain. Even if it is involved only in one step of the food chain, it has to be applicable. It is applicable. And then the standard allows small or less developed organization to implement an extremely developed combination of control measures. Control measures in terms of the safety, food safety. Now we look for the requirements of ISO 22000. So ISO 22000 specifies the requirements for a food safety management system whereby an organization in the food chain needs to demonstrate its ability in controlling of the food safety hazards in order to ensure that the food is safe at the time of consumption. So ISO 22000 has specified the requirements to enable an organization to plan well, implement and operate or maintain and update a food safety management system aimed at providing products that, according to their intended use, are safe for the consumers, as well as it helps to demonstrate compliance with the applicable statutory and regulatory food safety requirements. Getting an ISO 22000 certification will be even helpful to get the compliance with the national regulatory food safety requirements. Then The other thing is it helps to evaluate and assess the customer requirements and demonstrate conformity with those mutually agreed customer requirements that are related to the food safety in order to enhance the customer satisfaction. Also, to effectively communicate food safety issues to the suppliers, customers, and relevant interested parties in this food chain. It helps to ensure that the organization conforms to a stated food safety policy to demonstrate such conformity to relevant interested parties and to seek certification or registration of its food safety management system by an external organization or make a self-assessment or self-declaration of conformity to ISO 22000. Now, when we see the various benefits of accomplishing ISO 22000, those are first is enhanced customer satisfaction. When an organization is certified with ISO 22000 requirements, there will be enhanced customer satisfaction. There is compliance with the international standards. Then it helps to reduce various other investigation time. Then it gives a reputation as well as the public image. It helps even for traceability of the products. It helps to improve the performance and minimizes the risks that is associated with the food safety. So to talk about the key elements of ISO 22000, there are four important elements, or these are called as the pillars of ISO 22000. That is nothing but the interactive communication with the various stakeholders. Then system approach to food safety management system. We will see in detail about what is the system approach to food safety management system. Then implementing the prerequisite programs that are like GMP, GHP, all that, and implementation of HACCP principles. Even HACCP principle is playing as a very important key element of ISO 22000. So the process approach for achieving or obtaining ISO 22000 is by four important method, that is planning, doing, checking, and act. So it starts with planning. So planning includes the planning about the context, the risk that can be associated with their uh, the throughout the manufacturing, and then the support system that is needed. Then doing include the implementation of the PRPs, or if there are emergency requirements, as well as implementation of the HACCP principle. And once it is implemented, then it goes for the checking or monitoring is very important, where you are continuously checking whether all these are being meeting the objectives of develop of the food safety management. Then that includes monitoring, internal audits, and management review, the continuous review, the internal audits and management review. Then after checking, if it was found that certain things are not being met as per the objectives that is developed to achieve a food safety management, then they need to continuously improve upon it. So that is called the acting. That includes improvement and the various corrective actions for those non-conformities that had taken place, etc. So that is about the process approach, which includes planning, doing, checking, and act. So ISO 22000 has identified the following procedures to be documented, or these are some of the mandatory procedures. That includes documentation, records, corrections, corrective actions, all those recalls that has taken place, including the traceability and internal auditing. Now, when we see the ISO 22000 has brought us or given various requirements for achieving a food safety management system within an organization. So these are given under various sections. That is, under section 4, it describes or talks about the food safety management system general requirements, whereas section 5 talks about management responsibility, Section 6 is about the resource management. Section 7 about planning and realization of making it safe product. And Section 8 about validation, verification and improvement of food safety management system. So let us see one by one what it is. So under Section 4, it talks in general about the requirements, the general requirements of a food safety management system. So that helps to establish a food safety management system, and they have described about the documentation requirements. So the documents that is required by the food safety management system must be controlled in order to ensure that all the proposed changes are being reviewed prior to implementation. And this will help to determine the various impact on food safety and food safety management system. Also, a documented procedure shall be established in order to define the controls that are needed. Records must be established and they should be maintained in order to provide the evidence of conformity to the there should be records that must be established and maintained in order to provide the evidence of conformity to the requirement and of the effective operation of food safety management system. And all the records shall remain legible and readily identifiable and retrievable. So now the next section talks about the management responsibility for making or developing a food safety management system. That is, management, the company's top management shall provide the evidence of their commitment towards developing and implementation of the food safety management system and towards continually improving the effectiveness. So they shall provide the management commitment, and they should only be developing a food safety policy for the organization, then food safety management planning and responsibility and the authority, and appointment of a food safety team leader for food safety management system. Communications should be there, that includes external communication as well as internal communication. Emergency preparedness and response should be there, that is also part of the responsibility of the management. And the management shall also do review, the review input as well as the review output. It helps to continually improve their food safety management system. The next section describes about the resource management. The organization shall provide adequate resources for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and updating of the food safety management system. Resource management includes human resources, that even includes training as a major component, then infrastructural resources, work environment. All this has to be provided by the management. Now coming to the under the next session, it is about planning and realization of safe product. This section refers more on HACCP, and then the company must plan and develop the processes that are needed for the production of safe products. So the company must implement, operate and ensure the effectiveness of the planned activities and any changes to those activities. These actions include the prerequisites as well as the operational prerequisites. So under this section, they have described about prerequisite programs, then preliminary steps to develop the hazard analysis, operational prerequisite programs, HACCP plan, updating preliminary information and documents which specifies the prerequisite programs and the HACCP plan, verification planning, traceability system, and control of non-conformities. Then the next section talks about validation, verification, and improvement of the food safety management system. So the food safety team must plan and implement the processes that are needed to validate the control measure combinations and to verify the improvements of the food safety management system. So the validation, verification and improvement of food safety management system covers about the validation of control measure combinations, control of monitoring and measuring, The food safety management system verification or the internal audit. The organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals as part of the validation and verification. Then the responsibilities and requirements for planning and conducting audits and for reporting the results and maintaining records shall be defined in a documented procedure improvement. There shall be continual improvement and the food safety management updation. So, so that is all about the various sections within which the ISO 22000 has prescribed the requirements for achieving a food safety management system within an organization. Now let's see how to get an ISO 22000 certification in a organization. So what they have to do is first is to the implementation of prerequisite programs like GMPs, GHPs, GAPs, etc. And then once that is done, then they need to develop the ISO 22000 plans and the other documents that are required. Then comes the implementation of the system approach towards it. We have seen that how to do that. And then once they feel the organization feels that the required things are done, then they need to conduct an internal audit within the organization itself. Then once the internal audit is satisfactory, they can select a certification body, a third party certification body, and then the third party should do a pre-assessment, and if it is found satisfactory by the third party, then they will be obtaining the certification, and then the there will be a certification audit also by the third party, and then only they will be getting a certification of ISO 22000. And having any organization having an ISO 22000 is highly beneficial, and we have seen the various benefits of any organization which is involved in food chain is highly beneficial. So to conclude, let us say that the food safety is the assurance that the food prepared for human consumption is safe from various hazards. We have seen the various type of hazards. The purpose of a food safety management system is to ensure that the food is safe to eat and it will not lead to outbreak of foodborne illnesses among consumers. And now this international organization, international standard, that is ISO 22000 standard, allows organizations to implement an extremely developed combinations of control measures for achieving food safety management system. And these are some of the references for the advanced reading on the same topic. Thank you.